Three Righteous Mamas is a podcast that is on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all of our children. Hi, I'm Muna Husseini.
And I'm Christina Sansoon Ramirez.
And I'm Martha Pinkoff.
And thank y'all for joining us for our podcast. Remember to subscribe and give us a review. So today we are going to be talking about all of the momentous things that have happened this week. But before we go there, y'all, I got to tell you, I've lived in Texas over 20 years, and there is a snowman in my front yard that is as tall as I am, and that has never happened before.
I know.
You're one of the people that did the big snowman.
Yeah, Martha and I were saying like ours are like, 12 inches at best, and we were really impressed by that. So how did you do that?
Well, I don't know, because I have to admit, in my whole life, I've never built a snow person before, but like we started with a snowball fight and we were like crunching snow together. And then one of us I think my daughter dropped her snowball, and then she went to pick it up and then started rolling it, and it kept getting bigger. And she went, "Mommy, that's actually a real thing."
I love that people from Texas were like, I saw it in a movie once,
So anyways, we rolled this ball and then we kept going around the yard, and it became like really big, and we did that a few times, and that's how we made our first big snow person.
I feel sad that like I forgot that's how you did that, because I've been in Texas so long, because we used to make snowmen growing up in Ohio, right? Now I forgot that, because I was just like, here, Santi, you squish it together, and it's like little, like, he doesn't know better, so he thought it was really cool. So anyway, we've all been playing with our kids all day in the snow. So much fun. We baked cookies and chocolate chip cookies, and then went out and played in the snow, and it's been so much fun. What'd you do, Martha?
Vegan chocolate chip cookies?
Yeah, vegan chocolate chip cookies. Super good recipe. I would say healthier than other cookies, but because it's like applesauce instead of oil, but still a lot of sugar, and they're delicious.
I'm only going to know when you feed them to me. I don't believe you until then.
You need proof.
Challenge.
We had so much fun too. My kids, like, we had a snowball fight. We walked down the neighborhood and would like take all the snow off of the cars on the street and chunk it at each other. And my wife grew up in Wisconsin, so she did come with the knowledge of like how to roll the snowman. We just did it with the snow that was on the hood of our cars.
I remember, so a few years ago, maybe like, I guess now 4 or 5 years ago, Manuel and I moved to DC for like a hot second, but the week after we got there was the biggest snowstorm DC had ever seen. And Manuel thought it was so exciting because he had never seen like snow before. And he went out shoveling. He's like, shoveling is so much fun. And then like 15 minutes in, he's like, no. And then he has to keep doing it for hours. Like in the beginning, it's fun. It's really fun that it happened for one day. And I hope it doesn't happen again.
Well, good thing we're all at home and being virtual on some aspect, because Texas does not have any infrastructure to ice roads and, clear the snow off of streets. And that's why we have these amazing 20, 30 car pileups that the rest of the nation just laughs at us for. So hopefully people will be safe and drive safely and the ice won't impact us. But I'm not gonna lie, I was really excited to see the snow. And we actually just came back from a road trip. We drove all the way to Colorado to go skiing. And so we actually were all kitted out, had like snow boots and snow gear that we borrowed from our friends. And the kids were all ready to just go out there and do their thing. I think it would have been a lot more foreign, or, ooh, what is that weird stuff out there, if we hadn't just come back from skiing.
Okay, I have to tell one really quick story before, which is my mom had never seen snow, obviously, because she grew up in Mexico and like southern Mexico, where it does snow in Mexico and northern Mexico, but not in southern Mexico, where my mom's from. And she was living in like Ohio, and it snowed, and this, when the sun comes out when it snows, and my dad told her it was warm outside. So she got really excited. So she like put on her shorts and stuff like that. She went outside and realized it was freezing. Very mean of her.
Man.
That is kind of mean, but funny.
But also funny. Now we laugh.
It's pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's to Well, I'm gonna say here's to more snow in Texas, but I get that not everybody's there.
I'm gonna say here's to a real bright spot in an otherwise like just totally crazy week.
Oh gosh, I saw I saw this tweet where it was like December 37th, 2020. Keeps it
Well, that's
coming.
true.
Well, anyways, this has been a momentous day, I guess, for this week. But we were actually here because we wanted to chat about the activities of counting the electoral college votes and the, I'm gonna call them shenanigans that went down at the Capitol. Maybe there's a better word for it, but
Very
apparently
polite term.
That's very polite.
and there's a conversation happening. Is it an insurrection? Was it storming the Capitol? Was it, terrorism? I think it remains to be seen, and there's different points of view. But bottom line, there was, an incident that went down at, at the joint session of Congress, right? That's what it was, not necessarily at the Capitol. But yeah, let's chat about it. And Martha, what was your reaction, I guess, as the day was unfolding? What were your thoughts?
Well, so as the day was unfolding, I had a couple of thoughts. I had been worried about violence happening, as soon as we found out Trump had lost. I had been concerned about violence. So to a certain extent, I was not surprised that it was happening. In some ways, I was surprised that it had taken so long. But just like the visual of watching that group just overcome any security measures, any police, anything, and walk right into that house like it belonged to them, and the white supremacy inherent in their entitlement and in that behavior. It was a stunning display to me. And I mean, it happened on social media later, but of course, like thinking through like the Black Lives Matter protests and then seeing all of the images of like the National Guard ready for the Black Lives Matter protest, peaceful protest, largely peaceful. It just was visual confirmation of what we already know. And one of the things that I really started thinking about in my own privilege as a white woman is what like my experience is like when I get pulled over, like what it feels like in my body, how I am concerned. And I am not. Like the first thought when I see blue and red lights flashing in the back of my car is, I'm gonna see if I can get out of this ticket, because my body is safe. My white body is safe when I am pulled over, and I know that, and therefore I have such a different experience when I deal with law enforcement that I know is the privilege of the color of my skin. And that is a really fucking ugly truth about this country. And I thought about like my Black friends and what their experiences is when they're pulled over. My godson is a beautiful 22-year-old Black man, and he lives with us in the summertime. And when he goes out in the world, it scares the shit out of me, because I don't trust the people that are supposed to make us safe to honor his body the way that they will honor mine. Those were things I thought about.
Yeah. As I was watching the news, a couple of things occurred to me along the lines of what you're saying, where, I wear a headscarf, and I'm identifiable as Muslim. And so, for example, when I'm at the airport, forget even near security, I'm always on alert and extremely uncomfortable. And I don't do anything that might make me seem questionable when I'm at the airport, because I know with those laws, if someone even sniffs and thinks there's something going on, I'm gone. I'm out of there.
Mhm.
Right. And like I remember, I guess dating myself, but like back in college days when, people would use the slang like, oh, that's the bomb. I'd always be like, dude, just don't say that around me. Right. Because if someone feels like they heard something funny, they're going to point at me and I'm going to be out of there. And it used to kind of be a joke with my friends, but then they also knew it was true. Right. And so then a
Mhm.
lot of them stopped saying stuff like that. But there was a complete and utter double standard, and our bodies are treated differently. And I remember watching, and there were so many folks there that had these big old beards and their
Mhm.
faces are covered. And, like there's like one of these flags I saw that was like God, guns, guts, glory. And I just thought, take that same flag, flip the lens from whatever Christianity to Muslim, and like
Mhm.
that becomes a completely different sentiment of how it's viewed,
Totally.
and just what folks are okay with based on who is doing it. It just, there has to be an acknowledgement that people are treated differently. And I was watching what was going down, and I'm not gonna lie, like when I walk around, if I see someone wearing a MAGA hat, I unfortunately feel very uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
I've even like switched sides of the street when I'm walking because I don't feel like getting into a confrontation because I don't feel safe and I don't know how they're thinking about me. And maybe that's unfair of me to characterize somebody that way. But then when I
Mhm.
was watching what was going down and the things that folks were saying, there was like a noose outside the Capitol and all these things, right? And I saw a picture of someone wearing like a Camp Auschwitz shirt, and it wasn't
Yes.
like, these Kekistan flags and like all these like um, extremist sayings or symbolism. And I just thought, wow, like we have this veneer of civility, but I'm
Mhm.
sitting in my house and I thought, well, if these folks can just walk in to this central government building and proceeding, then how am I safe in my home if someone decides that they don't like me? And I just thought, I can't even do anything, right? I wouldn't be able to keep my family safe, and I'm still a little rattled over it.
Yeah.
I feel like our entire huge swaths of our country were rattled. Like, and I will say I appreciate it. I felt like it was the first time when you've seen such an obvious contradiction that the media really respond in that way. I actually heard, like, I was watching CBS when I was watching it, and I was really grateful that they mentioned time and time again the stark differences of how uh, most of us saw nonviolent Black Lives Matter protesters confronted across this country. And every police department is different, right?
Mhm.
But that was a consistent thread in many parts of this country. And that was
Yeah.
not lost on many folks. So, one thing I really saw that I appreciated is that, for example, I was just watching CBS News and I was watching things unfold and then continued reporting through the evening. And there was a constant reminder to the audience of how different the treatment was of these protesters than the treatment we saw in many places across this country of Black Lives Matter protesters that were also nonviolent, that were not storming uh, Capitol grounds where we were doing one of the most critical acts in our democracy, the transfer of power. That's what they were there to do, right? And it was really scary because I think people were shocked that that could happen, that we saw congressional representatives with gas masks on, huddling, fearful, people trying to break in, people sitting at the lectern, people sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk and writing, "We'll be back for you later," right? Like those actions were shocking. And that's why we've seen all kinds of actions from people and statements from people on all different sides. um, but I called my dad as it was unfolding, and I really appreciate my dad always because, we forget as we're talking about this that we won 2 Senate seats earlier that morning, it was called, where now we have the majority in Congress, we have the majority in the Senate, and we have the presidency, which means we can actually tackle, if they do their jobs, some of the things that we need, like tackling the pandemic, getting people their survival checks that they need to be able to care for their families and pay their rent and basic things like that. We can tackle things like raising the minimum wage and making our democracy stronger, like all these things. And so my dad said to me, Christina, I know it looks scary, but I want to remind you that they're there because they have no power anymore. We just took the Senate. Celebrate that. They're going to be cleared out. They will be. And what they've done is completely wrong, and hopefully they will be held accountable. But we have power. And so it just reminded me like how I called my dad, and even though he, you know, I'm an adult, he gave me perspective, right? Like, what are we teaching our kids in this moment? So I'm wondering for you all too, like Martha and Muna, the things that you want your kids to walk away with from this.
You know, I'll tell you, Christina, slightly different than what you're saying. My daughter came up to me, and so she's 12, and she said, you know, Mommy, were they all okay? And I told her that I believe that 4 people died. I think a police officer died. And then she told me, she goes, you know, Mommy, this is just like the active shooter drills that we do at school. And she was just in tears. And she goes, do you think they might do something to make us more safe now because now they know how it feels?
Oh, Mona. Oh my God.
And I looked at her and I actually said what your dad just said, where I said, you know, I hope that with the Senate and Congress and presidency all aligned, that common sense gun control can be passed, right? That keeps all of our public school students and frankly, people at work and in communities safe, right? In a way that makes sense. And I encouraged her, I said, why don't you write a letter or do something or talk to your class and see, like, get involved, right? Because these are things that affect your life too. But man, that one hit me right here because I never want anyone to feel that way. And like, here's stuff we have our kids practicing for.
Right.
It is an important lesson though. Just, I think growing up for me, my parents as immigrants were just trying to survive. They were trying to survive. They were trying to just put one foot in front of the other. And I don't really remember my parents really being involved or very engaged in the civic process. And, you know, I think about my daughter and, you know, like, you know, that first event, Christina, that you and I met at, and we emceed and you brought your baby with you. And like my daughter has attended so many events with me and heard me speak or marched with me, no matter what it is. And like this reality that our kids are growing up in, you know, for my family anyways, it's very different because we don't have a tradition of being involved, you know, in the civic process. And so she knows way more about power and power dynamics at 12 than I ever did. And you know, I know it's slightly off topic, but Christina, like you posted about your birthday recently and you kind of put this like timeline of events and I was reading that and thinking like, like that history that you have growing up and the things that you've been involved in like help create that base of your understanding, right, of like how we make a difference. And that's so important to pass on to our children, and like these conversations are such an important part of that too. And so I do think it's important. One of the things I've struggled with a lot is feeling helpless, right? And how do we make a difference, and how do we have agency in what's going on instead of feeling like, man, I'm one person, I'm stuck in my house, like who cares what I think?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My mother-in-law is living with us right now, and she and I got into a similar conversation in processing the events of the day. She was like, you do all this stuff, like you really believe that you can make something change. And I was like, yeah, but I look at my kids and I don't have another choice. Like, I hope is not optional. Hope is necessary, and movement towards a world that they all deserve to live in. I mean, it's not this version that we're in right now, is not optional.
Yeah.
And it feels super elementary, right? Like these lessons that we're teaching or that we're showing our kids with even the insurrection at the Capitol are elementary lessons.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of big, lofty questions that have come out about impeachment, rule of law, treason, like all kinds of legal questions. But you could boil it down to some very basic things. And I think a very basic core lesson that I want Santi to understand. Here in Texas, we had our Senator Ted Cruz try and lead the effort to stop peaceful transfer of power, to stop the will of the American people's voices to be heard. And then a few hours later, after people that were fomented by people like Ted Cruz, that were fomented by Donald Trump, had put their lives at risk. And they quickly saw, you know, what I don't see from people like Bill Barr or Ted Cruz or Betsy DeVos that have all found religion in the last few days, or are able to read tea leaves and say, oh God, this is going quickly. Let me quickly try and jump ship from where I was just standing 2 minutes ago. I don't see that as courage. I see, okay, you can read tea leaves. But for me, the lesson is this, is like, Santi, you always stand up for what's right. Even if it's not popular with the people that are your friends or your so-called friends, that you are willing to have the moral conviction to do what is right, even if something seems like it has short-term personal gain, but you know it's wrong. I promise you, there will be high costs and consequences for the people and values and things that you care most about. And a child understands that. Sadly, we have people in leadership that don't understand what your 6-year-old understands, your 4-year-old, and my 3-year-old understand.
That's
which
right.
is, if you see another kid push someone else down, you don't go help them do it or just stand there. And I guess the lesson for me is standing up for what's right. And for me, I just don't believe you belong in any position of leadership if you're not willing to stand up for what's right. It's that basic.
Yeah. And being in service to the people you're supposed to be in service to versus yourself or special interests or, I don't know, getting reelected. Like there's so many.
The congressman that represents me is Roger Williams, and he did not vote he didn't vote for democracy. That's right. He didn't vote for the will of the people. He didn't vote for any of that. He voted for a power play and a false god. But
well, I guess, is it representation if that's what their constituents wanted? I don't know.
But it's not democracy, right? Like it's been. Oh, my child is here. Speaking of, he wants me to come eat with him. Sorry, repeat what you said, Muna.
I said, well, on one hand, is it the right move for them if that's what their constituents lined up with, right? And so, Christina, you were saying it's not democracy if.
Well, this isn't, in my mind, democracy. This was the first time that we saw such a massive movement to undermine the will of the American people with no evidence whatsoever. And in my mind, you can't serve in a democracy if you don't believe in one. Like, it's just like a basic threshold.
But you don't serve.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you don't believe in one, if you don't serve it, if you don't serve the will of the American people, and it's another just sign of just I don't even believe they're trying to represent the people. I believe they're trying to represent like a small minority of folks, and they're like big donors. I just don't think that at the end of the day, they are acting from a place for any of us, for us,
Yeah.
like us as a country, for us and all of the values that we espouse to have or strive towards. And I do want to say, like, you know, you see people jumping ship all of a sudden on the Republican Party, but don't forget where people stood when you needed them. I believe people change, but people that are like Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham that have always been self-serving, don't expect that behavior to change.
Right.
Well, it's what our system rewards, right? And so there's a consideration for the system. And Martha, what comes up for you and what you want your kids to take away from this?
I mean, it's funny because I just keep thinking of, like, again, the elementary lessons of, like, if you see something, say something, right? Like, okay, kids, so if you see somebody being mean to somebody, or if you see somebody sitting alone, or if you see something that does not feel right in your body, say something. And then the other one, I mean, it's really like, I feel like maybe we need to have class with the United States representatives. I don't know. Like, maybe the Congress needs some momming. But the other one is walk, talk, tell. Like, if somebody's being mean to you, first walk away. Or if you don't like a situation, walk away. If you don't like the way something's going, talk about it. Like, talk about your feelings. And then if you're not able to get there negotiating that on your own, tell somebody and get help. And, like, I feel like that incredibly basic human transaction of conflict is somehow too hard. I don't know.
I have a hope that we stay in dialogue. And by we, I mean folks across the aisle, folks across the country. I drove to Colorado for this road trip, and granted, the majority of our trip was through rural areas. This is after the election. There were hundreds of Pence Trump flags and stickers and signs, and not just anywhere, but these are, in front of folks' homes, right? Like, they had to go out of their way to go put up this flagpole and hoist the flag, and it's still flying. It's post-election. And I just kept looking around thinking, I'm not sure what they voted for, but I hope there's a place for me in their view of America, and that there's such a divide between us, and we have to stay in conversation and connected with each other to be able to traverse this boundary, right? Because all of us staying in our own bubbles isn't going to change anything, right? And that's something that I hope, maybe it feels more complicated for grown-ups, but kids see through all of that stuff and connect and play and aren't quite maybe as jaded as the grown-ups. And I hope that our, whether it's in school or sports or whatever it is, right? Like, when we're going out of our, comfort zones or our bubbles, hopefully that we continue to connect and see each other's humanity and stay in conversation. And that our kids are part of building that better world, right? For all of us, because there's no better day to start than now. Like, you can't say, oh, we'll start doing that in 10 years when it's more comfortable. Just got to start now.
So James Baldwin is genius, and we all know that, but there is this quote from him that really, I felt strongly about this situation in particular. But he says, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hates so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain. I do not think that America has ever dealt with the pain of its origin, with the pain of children in cages, with the pain. There is so much pain sewn into this country that we have not dealt with, that we have to take some of our armor off and move towards that pain and start to heal, or we stay here and repeat this cycle until we are willing to face our pain.
I do have some friends who are Native or Indian, and many of them were like, yeah, this is, I don't understand why people are so shocked. Like, this is our history. It's been happening over and over and over. And now it just happened to you. That's the only difference. Right. So I think the other conversation I had with my daughter was around like, let's start reading some history books and let's start talking about this, because this isn't new. And we have to understand our history in order to stop repeating it. And so that's something that we will be doing together as a family. And Christina, I really like your focus. While nothing new at our house, I definitely want to be reiterating the integrity that we have to maintain with our children, and the courage it takes to stand up and, like, just start doing it and start modeling it so that our children have a strong base of being able to say, okay, like, this is how I stand up. And this is.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, so I'm a nerd. Like, I think we're all three nerds. And so we actually all do already study a lot of history. And so it's kind of fascinating to watch someone like Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, these people just go with the flow, that they know, like, if you have any moral compass or understanding of the Constitution, which took a vow to protect, right? You know what you're doing is wrong. And if you're a study, these people want to be known. They want political power. They want to be known in the history books. And the only way you get known in the history books for greatness is when you don't go with the flow. It's when you stand up for what's right. So, you're never gonna come to a place of power when you're seen as a puppet, when you're not seen as a person that's courageous. There's nothing to follow there, because that's not what a leader is. A leader stands up when it's unpopular. A leader can see which way to go before all of the pieces play out. And it seems like that's the advantageous personal thing to do. So to me, I already see that, like, our senator's trajectory, that he'll never achieve any greatness because there is nothing great about him. There is someone that is not a studier of history, and how you achieve greatness is all I see.
Well, on that note, I guess we can put a little bow in this conversation and say that we've got another great season lined up for our listeners.
So excited about it.
Yes. And
I'm very excited. Yes.
Speaking of leaders, we've got our next show queued up to be talking to Maria Hinojosa, who is a trailblazer and someone that has stood up for the truth and what is really happening, not just for the overall community, but, introducing representation as well. And so that's our next show coming up. We hope y'all will tune in, subscribe, review us, share with your friends, and we'll keep a secret all the other guests we've got coming up. But we look forward to being in conversation with y'all. And as always, Christina and Martha, it's always a pleasure chatting.
Yeah. Love y'all both. Here's to 2021 being a million times better than 2020.